My name's Ed Poole. I'm a member of the Green Party, and this summer we have our national executive elections. Today I'm speaking to one of the candidates for
Elections Coordinator.
elections coordinator. Thanks, Brian. Brian Candeland. Hi, Brian.
Hello.
Normally I would edit that out, but now I've done so many of these, I feel like it's become it's a less formal format, so I might leave that in. Um, why did you join the Green Party, and why do you think other people should?
Right. Well, I actually joined the Green Party when it was the Ecology Party, which gives you some idea of how long ago that was. We're looking at the early 80s here. Um, and it was a combination, really, of the whole Green Party policy program at that time, which is not a million miles different to what it is now, but it's far weaker on the social and economic side of things. A combination of that, plus the issue of nuclear weapons, which was very much a headline issue at that time, with American missiles being stationed in this country, and the whole escalation and the fear of nuclear war, which is not entirely gone away either. But interestingly, I had actually come across the Ecology Party slightly earlier in 1979 and kind of dismissed it as being kind of unrealistic and so on. But clearly, a couple of years into Thatcher and that era, I've perhaps become a bit wiser. I don't know. That's a way to look at it. So I'm probably. I feel I'm actually quite unusual at the moment in that I've never been a member of the Labour Party, or indeed any other party other than the Green Party or its predecessor named Ecology Party. So it's a very long history, really, and I'm not going to propose to go through every bit of it from then till now. So that's the first part of the question. Why should other people join it? I think that we bring together all the different strands that are really needed to reform our society. We've always recognised the ecological aspect of the world we live in, its limitations, having to work in harmony with nature and with the limits that the planet imposes upon us, which I think marks us out from the traditional left parties. But I think we've always had that social justice aspect as well, right from the early days. So I think we're combining that with a whole range of policies on the social and economic side of things, which really look at improving people's quality of life, of giving them something other than the crude economic growth of the old mainstream parties. Plus our commitment to democracy, to peace. I think we're the whole package. We're not always very good at getting the policy detail right or articulating it, but in terms of basic philosophy, I think we really pull it all together. And to me, I've never really seriously considered joining any other party in that time. So I definitely think this is where I belong and where people who think like me belong.
Great. This is my fifth political party for record, but again, that's probably a story for another time. Where are we up to? What do you think of the Green Party electoral strategy known as Target to Win?
I think it's been remarkably successful. Again, I'm afraid I'm going to probably go back to various points in history during this interview, but I think it's relevant. If you'd have told me, even 10, 12, 15 years ago, that we would have nearly 900 councillors, I would have just looked at you in blank astonishment, for instance. I don't think people outside of politics realise just how hard it is to win seats under the first past the post system, where you have to get enough people in a small geographical area to vote for you over and above every other every other candidate, every other party. And you can look at the history of other smaller parties in this country just to see how hard it has been for them and how easily they fall by the wayside. And I think that over a number of years, and actually the idea of target to win goes right back to the 1990s in this party. And I will be honest, it does owe quite a lot to the Liberal Democrats who've had the same challenges over time as we've had. But we've refined it enormously in the last 10 years with a kind of much more professional approach. And it's based on evidence, a lot of reasoning, real research into what works and what doesn't. We've actually achieved quite a remarkable amount. We're now approaching 900 councillors, principal authority councillors, and we've even proved in the last election that we can extend the philosophy to the parliamentary stage, where it's much harder to get elected than at council level. Having said all that, I think we're now at the point where we do need to be thinking a lot more broadly about how we win seats. We've had if you look at most of the success of Target to Win, it's happened when there's been an increasingly unpopular Conservative Party. We've been competing with Labour to some extent, although Labour are also becoming increasingly unpopular. We've now got a much more varied political landscape. For a start, we've had the rise of reform, and more, unfortunately, on them later, I think. We've also got this new party that's emerging with Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana, which, again, we'll probably have more to talk about in a minute. And I think we have to be a bit more flexible. I've always felt the Target to Win it's a kind of guidelines. It's a set of principles that are there for advice rather than a Bible, which always has to be followed to the letter. I think there is a danger that some people have actually taken it as, as a sort of fundamentalist gospel that you must never, ever deviate from. So I think there's a kind of balance there. I think, but having sort of experienced it from the inside at a number of roles, I do think it's been a remarkably successful strategy over the last 10 years.
What's your feeling on electoral pacts?
I'm increasingly suspicious of them. It won't surprise you, is something that's featured a lot in the Green Party's long history. Thinking back to the Unite to Remain pact, which we had with the Liberal Democrats in particular, also Plaid Cymru in the 2019 election. I did support that at the time. In retrospect, I think it was a definite mistake. I think we gained really nothing from that and sacrificed quite a bit in terms of profile and principle. So I'll hold my hands up and I think we got that wrong. Since then, I've been very much of the view that we should be standing everywhere in general elections, particularly. I've had numerous experiences over the years, particularly of the Labour Party, hassling us to stand down here, to stand down there. You'll split the vote, you'll let the Tories in, you'll keep the Tories in. All this to a quite tiresome degree. But I've also argued that, in fact, us standing is actually good for the left, if you want to call it a kind of broad left. I think if you take a marginal seat where we're standing and Labour are going to say, well, you're going to let the Tories in. Basically, if people are that minded to vote tactically, they will. They won't vote for us. They'll vote tactically. And we've seen that happen in marginal seats in election after election. But I think us standing actually helps to shift the Overton window, which hopefully a lot of viewers will be familiar with. But basically the idea that there's a window of policies or positions that are deemed mainstream. And sadly, recently, that's been increasingly moving to the right. And I think the more we take part in elections, the more we can shift that to the left as well, if you're looking at the old terms of right and left. And I've actually argued in the past that our standing in those kind of marginal seats actually helps the other progressive party as much as hinders it. There's going to be a lot of speculation, I think, coming up regarding the new party, which is very salient because it just launched yesterday, but it's been on the cards for a while. And my view is that, yes, we talk to them and indeed to other parties where appropriate, where there are some shared values or some shared policies. But it's not a question of standing down. It's a question of kind of looking where each of us are prioritizing our efforts. So we're not clashing directly, if at all possible. But we're not saying, right, well, we'll stand down here, you stand down there. I think there's a very valid argument that you're actually cheating the voters there. If there's voters in that constituency who particularly want to vote for a Green Party for very good reasons, which may not be immediately apparent to us, we're depriving them of that opportunity. And that's similar for, say, a kind of more mainstream left party as well, or for the Liberal Democrats, for that matter. And I think that it's not really helpful to us in wider terms as well to be doing that.
How do we make a bigger impact in the media?
Well, you would not believe just how frustrated I get in terms of the media. When pretty much, if it's not Donald Trump, it's Nigel Farage who's on there. You can say basically anything he likes and it's regurgitated without any sort of challenge whatsoever while we struggle to get in. I think we do have to really up our media game. I'm sure a lot of candidates will be saying that. I don't think it's easy. I think the mainstream media, particularly the print media, is totally against us from a kind of policy point of view. They're there to protect the interests of billionaire owners and their rich donors, their fossil fuel advertising income, all that sort of thing. So it's always going to be hard for us. I think we need to be taking more risks. I think our spokespeople should be willing to take more risks in getting coverage. Whether that's, I think Ed Davies cornered the market in hurling himself into bodies of water. So that's probably not an option, but there are risks associated with that. But in a way, at least if you're getting in the media, people are noticing you. And the name recognition for our leaders currently is worryingly low. I don't want to get into pros and cons of candidates in the leader debate in this interview, but I do think having a co-leader approach makes it harder. I think the media, they're very simple people. They're like one person, they know who to go to. And if you kind of dilute that too much, it does make a rod for our own backs. And I think there's a lot more we could do in some of the more innovative social media. I think we're slow to take up things like TikTok. I don't know much about these newfangled things. I'm a bit older-fashioned, but even again, parties like Reform, other parties are getting a lot more headway on some of these technologies, and I think we can perhaps be a bit bolder and a bit more imaginative in how we use some of these. So,
Right.
yeah, I think that covers it pretty much.
Find me on TikTok, by the way.
I'm not on it.
No, I'm
And
not really on it.
I've given up Twitter. I'm pretty much boycotting Twitter now. So
I'm not on TikTok. I've been on it for ages, never really used it, and then I started putting the deputy leader interviews on there. But like they were getting like 3 views, so I haven't put these ones on there. But if you want to be on TikTok, I can put this on there if you want. But I need to re-edit the graphics so it fits in a different aspect. Anyway,
yeah.
How do we attract more non-white members and voters to the Green Party?
Well, I think it's been one of our major failings over a number of years that we've been very much a kind of white, middle class, middle of the road party. I do detect some change to that. We have a number of global majority councillors now. I can think of several in the north, in the north of England that we've gained just in the last couple of years. And I mean, that admittedly, that has been the opportunity, and it's a terrible kind of event that's kind of helped us, the whole Gaza situation, but it has given us a bit of an opening into a community that previously was very loyal to Labour. I think a big problem we've had over the years has basically been our lack of real success in political terms, our lack of real power. I think a lot of the global majority communities very, very sensibly will look at, where is power, who's running things, and we've not really been able to get on the radar for that because, we've had so few, only one MP and relatively few councillors and very little political power. That has improved a bit, and I'm pleased to see that we have more representatives at council level from these communities, and they do have a really hard time of it. Only today, I was reading of the appalling abuse that one of our, I think, Muslim community candidates in Bristol has been getting on social media, and we do need to be good at identifying these problems and being able to support these candidates where and councillors where they're suffering from that. I think we've still got a long way to go, but I think we have got better, but I think we've got a long way to go. And I think the key thing is to actually really make that extra effort to engage with these groups of people, with these communities, find out where they're coming from, and perhaps get out of our old white middle class bubble a little bit more.
How can the Green Party assure disabled people that we're listening to them?
One of the things that has almost astonished me in recent months is the extent to which our Labour government, who one would have thought would be a kind of progressive, empathetic government, has absolutely attacked disabled people. And I think we can do a lot more again, as I mentioned, with the global majority communities. I think there is a lot more we can do to engage with those communities. I think it's something that we're a lot more aware of, because now that we have a lot more councillors, we're doing a lot more door knocking, particularly in the more deprived areas. We are becoming a lot more aware of the difficulties a lot of these people face. So I think again that's something that's, you know, that is improving, and again it's something that we need to be a lot better at. It's difficult because, you know, a lot of these people do need a lot of support to be politically active, and you know we're always strapped for having enough money to be able to do that. We don't get the kind of big party, the big corporate donors that other parties get, and you know it is difficult to provide support for all these people.
How should we handle transphobia in the Green Party?
Well, I am very much a supporter of trans inclusion and trans rights. I support. I believe that trans women are women and trans men are men. I think this party as a whole, I'm proud of this party's policies on trans rights and inclusion. Unfortunately, this has become a horrendously divisive issue in our society. If you trace back several years to, I mean, it's not the only thing that's behind it, but the far right over in the United States has really seized on this as a way of pitching different groups against each other. And there's the whole gender critical movement has enormous power, enormous sway in this country. And it's not something that I think is compatible with Green Party philosophy. And I think that our policies are very much in line with progressive parties right across Europe. Having said that, we are in a climate where gender critical views are a protected belief. We can't discriminate against people purely on the question of their belief within the party without running into legal difficulties. So we have to, whether we think the law is right or not, we have to abide by it, and that can lead to some difficulties in some of the complaints and disciplinary processes in the party. And whilst GPEX doesn't have a role in that directly, we are responsible for the bills, the legal fees, and everything else. So, while at the one hand we're very mindful of kind of supporting people, we have to kind of balance that as well at times. So, but I think the answer is to just be absolutely clear that party policy is pro-trans rights, it's pro-trans inclusion, and I think the vast majority of ordinary members are actually fine with supporting trans people. It's just unfortunate that we're having to deal with some differences of opinion there at the moment, and I'm hoping that will change, and that, you know, maybe 20 years time we'll look back on the gender critical movement much in the same way that we look back on those who opposed gay rights in the 1980s and so on. And that, you know, if you look back then, nobody would have thought we'd get to a point of gay marriage. That's totally accepted now, and I think we're just going through that kind of difficult period of getting to that. I'm hoping that's the case anyway.
How important is social and economic class in politics?
I think it's still very important. It's used as a weapon, of course, now. The idea of the white working class that are being flooded with immigration and so on, the sort of propaganda you get from the right. Of course, in reality, people of all races are working class. I think, again, we've been very much a middle-class party up to now. I think we still are predominantly. It's a lot easier for middle-class people to get involved in political parties because they've got the time, they've got the money, relatively. I do think that there are more working-class activists within the party than is sometimes realised, perhaps more up here in the north, which is also a bit of a neglected area sometimes in party thinking. But certainly, if you actually think, well, what is class now? There are a lot of people who are kind of quite well off, who are still sort of marginalised. They're still it's very much, I think, the super rich or the rich very against the rest of us. And I think that there's a lot. Although I think class is still important, I think there's a lot of wedge issues going on to try and separate out, say, people who think of themselves as middle class and working class, whereas in fact, you know, we're really on the same side against those who are right at the top, who are exploiting us.
What other issues are important to you?
Well, there's lots of issues, but I think one I'd like to home in on, or a couple I'd like to home in on particularly, democracy, which I think is seriously under threat in this country. It won't surprise you to know that I feel strongly about the voting system, having suffered at the hands of it for many decades. But I think not only is it extremely damaging to the Green Party and indeed to the wider politics, but I think it poses a real threat of a far right government getting in on a minority vote, but having absolute power. People are often putting these projections of who would win what seats on current opinion polls. Obviously, that's entirely speculative, but you often see Reform coming out with about 350, 400 seats and absolute power. And the prospect of that is absolutely chilling. We can criticise the present government, and rightly so, but I think we're looking at a whole worse situation if that were to arise, and we seem to be sleepwalking into it. The present government has no interest in any sort of democracy. They're busy slashing the number of councillors that are in the country, so you get less representation under the guise of devolution, which is anything but. So I think that is something that I think we've got a lot to say on, both me individually and as a party. And really leading on from that, I think the rise of the far right generally is something that horrifies me. The situation in the USA, for instance, what's going on there, I never expected to see in my lifetime. We've got the rise of the far right everywhere. I've just alluded to the danger in this country. And I think that we are the antidote to that. I think the old parties have really failed. They've lost the confidence of the public. And what's needed is an alternative vision. And I think it's not just an opportunity for us to provide that. I think it's a duty to actually give people hope, to give people something to really believe in, and something which actually meets their own personal needs, which neither Labour nor Tory, let alone Reform, have done. The Labour government's been a massive disappointment. I never thought they would be that fantastic, but they've massively disappointed me even so. And I don't see that turning around. And I think it's a very worrying situation that we've got in this country. And I hope that there's more that we can do. I think, we haven't got all the answers, but I think there's so much more that needs to be done on that.
Why do you think we should vote for you, and what will you do if you're elected?
Well, I've been doing the job for nearly 3 years now, and I would argue that those have been incredibly successful years with gaining 4 MPs from previously having 1, and gaining another 300 councillors, etc. Now, I'm not going to kind of say, well, that was all down to me, because far from it. I've got a really good team of people who work, professional staff who really do most of the day-to-day work. And I think my role is really just to kind of support and encourage them as much as anything. There's more to the job than that. There's a key governance role to being on the executive. I think that I've now got the experience and the knowledge to really do that well. I'm not above, I don't think I've achieved everything I want to do by a long way in that 3 years. There's several areas where we now need to up our game. The fact that we've got 4 MPs as well as 2 peers, we really have a sort of noticeable parliamentary party now. And I'm one of a number of people who are looking at how we provide oversight, accountability, support to those elected representatives. We had a meeting this week, and that's something I'd very much like to continue to build on. We're very keen to get a proper voter engagement or canvassing software in place. It's something that the party's been wanting for years, if not decades. It's constantly been frustrated, and I'm very keen to get that finally and properly off the ground. Although, it's never easy given the limitations of money and resources. So there's a lot of and we've got the preparations for the next general election, which might be 4 or 5 years ago, but we're already looking at identifying development constituencies will then become target constituencies, how we find a wide range of really good quality candidates. These are all exciting things which are happening here and now, which I'd very much like to continue to support and be part of. And I think I can really continue what we've done, and indeed build on what we've done over the last 3 years.